Hi. I wanted to give some publicity to this man, J. Barton Payne. The Encyclopedia of Biblical Prophecy is probably his most famous work. As you can see, it's 746 pages. It was published in 1973, 6 years before Payne died. It's one of the most comprehensive works on prophecy, so I certainly strongly recommend it. But that's not the book I wanted to use today. There's another contribution Payne made in this, the Expositor's Bible Commentary, which some of you will have seen, 12 volumes covering the whole Bible. Payne contributed to this volume the first and second books of Chronicles. Now, in this book, he, of course, has to deal with the most famous passage that witnesses use on the subject of the 70 years exile. So I thought I would read you some of what Payne says about what that 70 year comprises. First of all, he makes the point that the books of Daniel and Jeremiah date the exile from not the third stage of the exile, that is the destruction of the temple in the year 586 or 87, but from the first phase of the exile during the reign of Jehoiakim. Here's what Payne says about that period. During his 11 years, Jehoiakim did evil. As explained in Ezra's more detailed sources, this monarch first taxed his land to provide tribute to the pharaoh. Though he himself lived in luxury, he perverted justice and oppressed the poor, and he persecuted the prophets that God sent to reprove his sin. After 4 years, the Babylonian leader Nebuchadnezzar, whose name is more frequently and more accurately rendered as Nebuchadnezzar, attacked westward. In the spring of 605, he and his forces won a decisive victory over Necho, that's Pharaoh, at Carchemish. As a consequence, the Egyptians were driven back to their own borders, and the whole western Fertile Crescent, including Palestine, was given into the hands of Nebuchadnezzar. The victor proceeded to bind Jehoiakim with bronze shackles to carry him into captivity. Such a threat may, however, have been sufficiently effective to render unnecessary his actual removal to Babylon. The fact that Nebuchadnezzar took to Babylon articles from the temple, together with an initial captivity of selected Jewish hostages, including the prophet Daniel, marks the beginning of Israel's 70-year Babylonian exile from 605 to 536. And he references not only Jeremiah 25, where you have the first reference to the 70 years as occurring from the first year of Nebuchadnezzar, 605, and Jeremiah 29, where we're told that a letter was sent from Jeremiah to those already in exile, in the second exile that we'll get to in a second, under Jehoiachin, the son of Jehoiakim. So the 70 years is already counting when Jeremiah writes that letter. So Payne goes on, the historicity of Nebuchadnezzar's advance against Palestine in 605 and of this first stage of the Hebrew deportations was once widely questioned by scholars who were committed to the historical critical method. It was recorded, after all, only in the highly suspected books of Chronicles and Daniel. Yet their authenticity was strikingly confirmed by D.J. Wiseman's publication in 1956 of 2 new tablets out of the Babylonian Chronicles. In these, Nebuchadnezzar states that in the summer of 605, he conquered the whole land of Hatti, meaning the western Fertile Crescent, including Palestine, and took heavy tribute of Hatti to Babylon. So that's the reign of Jehoiakim. Now, Jeconiah, or also called Jeconiah or Jehoiachin, Jehoiakim's son, comes to the throne. Payne says about that on April 22nd, 597, King Nebuchadnezzar had Jehoiachin deported from Jerusalem, and he was brought to Babylon along with a second and more extensive deportation. This included the prophet Ezekiel and 10,000 of the leaders and skilled workers that made up the backbone of Jewish society. So that is the reign of Jehoiachin, who only reigned for 3 months before he went into exile. Then we have Zedekiah, who is Nebuchadnezzar's puppet king. Payne goes on 15th of January, 588, the Lord brought up against Judah the king of the Babylonians, and on 28th of July, 586, the Hebrew capital of Jerusalem fell. For greater detail on the city's capture and pillage, see 2 Kings 25 and Jeremiah 39 and 52. The 586 destruction of Judah is also the subject of the biblical prediction that involves more verses than any other direct prophecy that is to be found within Scripture. 608 verses distributed among 17 different books of the Bible. The articles from the temple were carried to Babylon, and on the 14th of August, the sanctuary itself was burned. Now, there's a part here that, as witnesses, we wouldn't have been at all aware of. In terms of deportation, it's not just three, the third of which is the Zedekiah, the destruction of the temple. There's a fourth, and here we go. In describing the remnant who escaped from the sword, Ezra omitted, as less relevant to the restored post-exilic community, discussion about the regathering of refugees under Gedaliah and the flight of their remnant to Egypt, about the small fourth deportation of 582 BC, and about the poorest people of the land that were left scattered in Palestine. Now, if you want more details on that, you can go to Jeremiah 52 and 2 Kings 25. So, contrary to what we were told, the land was not completely desolate after the destruction of the temple. In fact, it was never completely desolate. He speaks rather of those carried into exile in the third and great deportation of 586. Correspondingly, archaeology has demonstrated the thorough depopulation of Judah at this time. So the deportation made the land desolate, comparatively, but not totally. Thus the exiles came to Babylon, where they became servants, and yet after an initial period of discouragement and oppressive service, at least some Jews gained favor and status, including, of course, Daniel. Those who were among the more worldly grew indifferent and drifted away from their faith, but the more godly increased in their spiritual maturity. Then note this, the statement that for 70 years, in fulfillment of the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah, the land enjoyed its Sabbath rests, seems to correlate the full span of the exile, that is from 605 to 536, with an equivalent number of sabbatical years. This produces a total figure of 70 times 7, or 490 years, and the idea is that of making up for half a millennium of neglected sabbatical rests. So obviously Payne believes, with the great majority of scholars, that the 70 years began with the original deportation in the days of Daniel. Now, Carl Olaf Johnson in the Gentile Times considers this in much greater detail than Payne does here. So we'll have I'll put a link on the screen to our discussion of that book, and I highly recommend you locate it. It's available for free on PDF right online. So that will be the link I'll put on the screen. But check Jeremiah 25 and 29, where the correlation between the beginning of the 70 years and Nebuchadnezzar's first year is made, and Daniel chapter 9, where we have, I should say Daniel chapter 1, where in the very first verse we have Daniel dating his exile from the third year of Jehoiakim, apparently by Babylonian reckoning, whereas in Jeremiah it's the fourth year of Jehoiakim, which is the first year of Nebuchadnezzar. Jeremiah seems to be using the Hebrew reckoning, and Daniel, understandably, writing from Babylon, is using their reckoning. See you soon.